Every evening at exactly 7 p.m., the atmosphere in the elegant restaurant shifted the moment Mr. Dalton walked through the door. He was always impeccably dressed, tailored suits, polished shoes, an expensive watch that caught the candlelight just right. But beneath the surface elegance was a storm of bitterness and entitlement. The staff whispered warnings when his reservation showed up on the list. They knew the routine. He would sit at his usual corner table, swirl his aged wine with an air of superiority, and unleash a barrage of insults at the slightest imperfection. Plates were returned untouched, water wasn't cold enough, the music was too loud or too soft. No one escaped his scrutiny. The younger waiters often drew straws to see who would have to serve him. The veterans simply avoided his gaze, hoping to stay out of his line of fire. But everyone endured it, for tips, for reputation, or simply because he was rich and powerful. His influence stretched beyond the restaurant. People said he owned properties, had connections with city officials, and funded charity events, though never with a smile. He was the kind of man you tolerated because confronting him felt impossible. And then, one evening, someone new walked in, not as a guest, but as part of the staff. Her name was Emily. Just a few weeks into the job, she'd already made a quiet impression, polite, gentle, and observant. She noticed the fear in her co-workers' eyes when Mr. Dalton's name came up and listened patiently as they warned her to keep her head down if she ever had to serve him. But Emily wasn't rattled. She wasn't naive either, but there was something calm and steady about her. She believed, deep down, that everyone had a story, even people like him. So when the moment came and she approached his table for the first time, the tension was immediate. He scoffed before she even greeted him. He rolled his eyes, questioned her competence, and threw a sarcastic remark about the service. The usual scene was unfolding. But what happened next no one expected, not even Mr. Dalton himself. Because instead of retreating in fear like the others, Emily stayed. And what she said next would begin to unravel years of pain hidden behind Mr. Dalton's harshness. In the dimly lit staff room tucked behind the kitchen, the clatter of pots and muffled voices from the dining area formed a low hum. The evening shift was just beginning, and waiters bustled about, adjusting uniforms and reviewing reservations. In the corner, a new face quietly tied her apron. Her name was Emily, young, soft-spoken, with eyes full of curiosity and kindness. She had just arrived in the city a week ago, carrying little more than a suitcase and the weight of needing to make things work. This job wasn't just a paycheck, it was her chance at stability, a new beginning. As she smoothed out her apron and clipped on her name tag, two senior servers, Maya and Jared, approached with concerned expressions. They had seen enough new hires fall apart after just one encounter with Table 7. "Whatever you do," Maya said, her voice low, "if you get assigned to Mr. Dalton's table, be careful." Jared added, "He'll find a reason to hate you, too slow, too polite, not polite enough. He once made a hostess cry for smiling too long." Emily listened intently, nodding, but her expression remained calm. She wasn't arrogant or dismissive, just steady. "Why does he come here if he hates everything?" she asked softly. The others shrugged. "Habit. Control. Maybe loneliness," Jared muttered, grabbing his tray. They all expected fear, or at least worry, to show on Emily's face. Instead, she gave a small, knowing smile. "Everyone's human," she said gently. "Even if they forget how to act like one." It wasn't defiance, just empathy, a quiet strength that caught Maya off guard. No one had spoken about Mr. Dalton with that kind of grace before. As the staff poured out into the restaurant floor and the dinner rush picked up, Emily blended in, calm amidst the chaos. She didn't know exactly what she'd face that evening, but she carried something different into the shift, an open heart, unclouded by fear. While the rest braced themselves for survival, Emily prepared to meet the infamous man not with dread, but with the one thing he hadn't seen in years, understanding. The restaurant buzzed with life, clinking silverware, soft piano music, quiet conversations flowing from every corner. Waiters weaved through the maze of tables, balancing plates and glasses with rehearsed precision. Amid the flow of warmth and chatter, Table 7 sat like a black hole, pulling all attention toward it. Mr. Dalton had arrived, his expression already sour, his glass of wine barely touched. Emily held her tray steadily as she made her way toward him for the first time. She had watched him from a distance the past few nights, how staff tensed in his presence, how his complaints rang louder than the laughter in the room. Tonight, she'd been assigned to his table. Not by accident. Jared offered to trade, but she refused. As she gently placed his entree before him, a tiny detail set him off. Perhaps the garnish was off-center, or the plate wasn't warm enough. He barely looked at the food before slamming his napkin down. "Are you all brainless? Is this the best you can do in this overpriced circus?" His voice pierced through the dining room like a whip. Conversations halted. All heads turned. A fork clinked against a plate somewhere, and then, silence. The usual reaction would have been apologies, nervous nodding, quick retreat. But Emily didn't flinch. She stood firm, heart pounding, but her voice steady. She looked him straight in the eye, her tone soft but unshaken. "Sir, who hurt you so deeply that you think this is how people deserve to be treated?" It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't sarcasm. It was a question born from compassion, spoken in a moment when everyone else had backed away. Her words didn't accuse, they reached. The room held its breath. Mr. Dalton's face stiffened. The fury in his eyes flickered, then dulled, like a match struggling to stay lit. No one had ever spoken to him that way. Not with defiance, but with concern. It wasn't just her courage that stunned the room. It was her kindness, unshaken even under fire. And in that moment, something shifted. Not just in him, but in everyone watching. For a few seconds, the entire restaurant stood suspended in silence, no clinking glasses, no murmured conversation, just the soft hum of the overhead lights and the weight of Emily's question hanging in the air. Mr. Dalton didn't respond right away. He stared at her, stunned, as if her words had knocked the wind out of him. The anger that had just moments ago blazed in his eyes now gave way to something else: confusion, vulnerability, pain. His hand, still gripping the edge of the table, trembled slightly. Then, almost without realizing it, he looked away. His gaze drifted to the far corner of the restaurant. His voice, when it finally broke the silence, was barely above a whisper. "My wife died in this restaurant," he said, pointing with a subtle motion to a small, candlelit table near the window. "Right there. We were having dinner. She laughed at something I said, then just collapsed." His throat tightened, and he paused, swallowing the memory. "That was the last time I saw her smile. Since then, I just come here to feel something. Anything." The once mighty man who had reduced staff to tears now looked impossibly small, hunched over in a sea of regret. Emily stood still, her eyes softening as she listened. She didn't rush to speak. She simply gave him what no one else had ever dared to offer: presence. No judgment. No fear. Just understanding. Around them, waiters quietly resumed their movements, though slower now, more aware. Diners who had overheard the outburst now looked away, not out of discomfort, but respect. The mood in the restaurant had shifted. A secret had been spoken aloud, not just about grief, but about how much pain can hide behind cruelty. No one had ever asked Mr. Dalton why he acted the way he did. No one had tried to see beyond the sharp tongue and cold demeanor. But Emily's question hadn't just confronted his bitterness, it had gently reached through it, like sunlight cracking through a sealed window. And for the first time in a very long while, Mr. Dalton allowed himself to be seen. A week had passed since that unforgettable evening, and the restaurant felt different. The staff moved with a new kind of ease, the kind that comes when a heavy weight has been lifted. No one knew if Mr. Dalton would return. Some hoped he wouldn't. Others wondered if, just maybe, something had shifted. Then, right at 7 p.m., the door opened. But this time, there was no tension, no whispered warnings. Mr. Dalton stepped inside, dressed as sharply as ever, but with something new on his face, a smile. In his hand, he carried a small bouquet of wildflowers. The same kind that used to sit at the center of his table back when his wife was still alive. He didn't bark at the host. He didn't roll his eyes or critique the lighting. He simply nodded politely and made his way to the back, where Emily was folding napkins near the bar. The staff paused, watching. He approached her quietly, then handed her the flowers and an envelope. "For you," he said, voice gentler than anyone had ever heard. Inside the envelope was a generous tip, but more importantly, a handwritten note that read, "Thank you, for seeing the man behind the mask." Emily smiled, tears welling just slightly, and nodded. No big speech. No spotlight. Just two people acknowledging something real between them. That night, instead of sitting alone at table 7, Mr. Dalton joined the staff in the break room after closing. He laughed, really laughed, for the first time anyone could remember. He even helped stack chairs. The walls he had built for years crumbled, not because someone fought them, but because someone cared enough to look past them. One gentle act cracked years of bitterness. And for the first time in forever, Mr. Dalton didn't dine alone, he shared coffee and stories with the very people he once ignored. Because sometimes, the loudest cries for help come disguised as anger. And sometimes, the quietest voice in the room becomes the one that changes everything.